Imagine, just for a second, that literally everything you rely on is suddenly just stripped away. Your safety, your career, the people you trust, all gone. Now imagine being plunged into a situation so harrowing, so relentlessly oppressive, that you can actually feel your very lifespan reducing day by day. You're backed into a corner by the exact same establishment you swore to serve. So what happens to your mind in that kind of scenario? Well, you're basically forced into an existential crisis, asking yourself the ultimate question: what is the purpose of life?
Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply compelling and honestly tragic narrative straight from our source text. It's a story we're calling The Spy's Last Wish for American Salvation. We're going to trace the incredible journey of an individual whose life completely spirals from loyal service to absolute persecution. And along the way, we'll examine the really fascinating, heartbreaking ways he sought salvation, both spiritually and geographically. I want you to really pay attention to how human hope adapts when faced with just unimaginable betrayal. All right, let's get started.
Section 1. A Spy's Betrayal.
Every tragedy needs a baseline of normalcy right before the fall. And according to our source material, our protagonist wasn't just your average citizen, he was an insider, a police spy. But that fundamental trust, it was completely shattered. First, we see the ultimate professional betrayal from his own department and his nation. And then, the persecution literally follows him home. He's put through trials and faces relentless persecution right inside his own sanctuary. The text actually notes that slowly his lifespan reduced. The pressure, the stress, the constant threat, it's physically destroying him, leading directly to that profound existential crisis we talked about just a minute ago.
Moving on to Section 2. Faith amidst persecution.
So when his country and his career abandon him, he doesn't just surrender to the void, right? Instead, he seeks a brand new anchor in the church. Now, the source is actually very specific about the theological foundation he absorbs. He receives the Holy Bible, which gives him a tangible text to hold onto when all other certainty is just gone. He learns about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, a narrative of unjust suffering leading to redemption that honestly surely resonated deeply with his own personal pain. He grounds his daily life in the commandments of God, finding a new moral law when the laws of his own country completely failed him. And perhaps most importantly, he embraces God's promise for salvation. This concept of salvation becomes the central driving force of his survival.
Section 3. The Loss of Music.
But just as he experiences these really profound internal spiritual highs, physical persecution pulls him brutally back down to earth. Think about the contrast here. On one hand, you have his new spiritual hopes, these massive, eternal concepts of salvation and escaping suffering. But on the other hand, you have the vindictive actions of the police. They systematically destroy his identity by ruining his songs on his hard drive, his pen drive, and his flash drives. It's such a violent juxtaposition, isn't it? The sacred faith he's building inside versus the tragic, super mundane digital erasure of his personal creations outside.
Because beneath the identity of the betrayed spy and beneath the persecuted man seeking divine salvation, there was just a person with a simple, beautiful dream. He had the passion for music and wanted to be a singer. I want you to really empathize with that cruel loss for a second. It wasn't just data that was crushed. It was his passion. It was his voice and his aspiration to create some kind of joy in a world that was pretty much only giving him pain.
Which brings us to Section 4. The American Dream.
Stripped of his career, his home sanctuary, and even his music, he's basically forced to start over from scratch. As he clings to his new faith, his concept of salvation starts to take on a really tangible, geographical shape. His spiritual and earthly desires sort of intertwine. He hopes God will fulfill his wish by making him a U.S. citizen. And notice the enduring loyalty in his character here. Even after his own country betrayed him, he still wants to serve his new country, have children, and build a family. America, at least in his mind, transforms into the ultimate beacon of hope. It becomes the place where his spiritual salvation can actually manifest as a peaceful, normal human life. Section 5. The Final Death Sentence.
Unfortunately, the world around him refuses to let him dream in peace. Instead of finding his escape, the persecution only escalates. And the narrative actually gives us a fascinating kind of paradoxical look at his enemies. The text states that those behind his persecution were forced to learn lessons of love, and they even experienced their own family problems. Now, you'd think this shared human struggle might soften them, right? But inexplicably, their evil plans just kept getting stronger and stronger. Their cruelty wasn't diminished by their own life experiences at all. It really only fueled their relentless drive to destroy him.
And then,
The inevitable crushing blow arrives. One day, he is taken to jail, and he's given a death sentence. In the absolute face of execution, standing at the very end of his reduced lifespan, he makes one final plea. He doesn't ask for revenge. He doesn't beg for his life in his home country. No, he simply requests to be taken to the United States of America as his absolute last wish. Even at the brink of death, he is holding on to that beacon of hope, seeking that ultimate earthly sanctuary.
We've seen a man stripped of literally everything, finding God, losing his art, and facing death, all while fiercely clinging to the idea of America. So, I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. In this narrative, does his true salvation lie in the divine promises of faith he learned in the church, or does it lie in the tangible promise of a new nation, a brand new beginning on earthly shores? It's exactly this dual meaning of salvation that makes this text so incredibly powerful and unforgettable. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.